Ladies and gentlemen, as I did mention that we will now have our keynote address kickstarting the Sustainability Summit for 2022. It is a great honor to introduce Mr. Sunil Janes, who is a Director for Global Governance Affairs and CSR Africa, which also engages on global sustainability. And he is from SAP. Over to you, Mr. Janes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tabang, for that warm welcome, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are in this era that we find ourselves in. It's a pleasure and an honor to join us once again at this fantastic event, which repeats. They came up with this real-time software which was able to report on processes within organizations, taking into account the generic processes that you have linked to HR, payroll, accounts payable, etc. And that happened in 1972, and we can't believe it, we're 50 years old already. It's a multinational corporation operating in several countries with a turnover of some 27.84 billion euros in the last financial year, which was in 2021. And for those who don't know what SAP stands for, it's Systems, Applications, and Products in Data Processing. But of course, that's a mouthful, and it's been abbreviated to SAP. Now, the topic for today, what an interesting topic. It's been a topic for a long while. I remember a while back, somewhere around 2009, I received a scholarship to attend what was then called the One Planet Leaders, which was held WWF. And of course, I always had a passion for sustainability and was very excited to have received the scholarship, which took me to Geneva and first, and then segued out to Zurich, only to find myself undergoing this entire process and immersion into the topic of sustainability in a very interesting place, which is actually previously a church, which was then set up to be a sustainable organization. And back then, I just listened at that time to the presentations, and most of the presentations that were made at that time were from the likes of your FMCG manufacturers, so to speak, your Coca-Colas of this world, who also happens to be a customer of SAP, SAP Miller, your beer manufacturers, organizations that were typically utilizing a number of resources. And in 2009, the WWF was saying that we need 1.5 planets to sustain the way that we're consuming on this, this Mother Earth of ours that has sustained us for generations. And to think now that although this sustainability topic was limited in those days to these manufacturing industries, guess what? The topic has become the primary focus in every industry, in every continent of this planet that we find ourselves in. More so at every societal level that you find yourself, sustainability is the topic of the day. Now, let's then drop down a level and talk about SAP and how we're approaching this topic of sustainability. It's always been a major topic for us from early days. And SAP views the topic of sustainability from two perspectives, or sort of two levers. The first one is to be an exemplar. You've got to walk the talk. You've got to lead by example. And the second, because SAP is involved in the so-called production or development of software our carbon footprint is nowhere near the likes of the carbon footprints of some of our customers that we have in oil and gas, or in the avionics industry, the airline industry, or the motor manufacturing industry. So therein lay one of the biggest opportunities of SAP, which was to become an enabler to our customers and our partners. And in so doing, I will talk a little bit about that. So just imagine this SAP 2 pillars. One is to be an exemplar, and the second one is to be an enabler. Now, as an exemplar, an interesting fact, which is we don't talk about enough, I believe, within SAP, but of course outside it's becoming even more well-known topic, is that SAP has been the leading organizations in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for the past 15 years, which means that practices that were focused on ensuring that the organization remained a sustainable one have been in place. Much of what we do is included in our integrated sustainability report, which talks from one end of the spectrum of how we hire more and create more diversity in the organization in terms of our internal sustainability, how we go about our corporate social responsibility practices, and what type of programs and projects we are putting in place within the organization to reduce our overall carbon footprint. Now, you'll hear from other speakers, and I've seen a lineup of some of the most fascinating speakers. I'm interested to listen to some of them later on to the future. But then let me talk about a few other aspects. Now, SAP produces software, and we produce software for different industries, from motor manufacturing to your oil and gas, and then in the public sector as well. And I noted the next item on the agenda is smart cities. Now, we have an increasing interest in this area because a number of the world-class cities in the world, on this planet operate on SAP software. And much of that, you'll hear much more about that in the next session. But I thought I should touch on that and sort of highlight the fact that increasingly cities around the world are where the rubber sort of hits the road. That's where majority of people are living their lives. From a provincial level in terms of administration, etc., policies, practices are more at the higher arching level and the national level. Now, coming back to this whole idea of being an exemplar first and foremost, SAP has been for a while now, working across the board internally within the organization, working in different areas to ensure that as many of our employees are brought up to speed on the topic of sustainability and how this impacts us within the organization per se. And we have another topic which is driven quite strategically, which is the sustainability champions within SAP. And that's largely people who may not even be part of the sustainability organization per se, but who are doing great things in their society because it is the topic of the day. Now, in terms of just taking it further on the work that we're doing as an enabler, SAP has also developed a software stack for sustainability, which a large number of our customers are increasingly taking on to ensure that they are able to plan for their carbon footprinting, so to speak, to be able to monitor that, to then utilize the monitoring and then analyze what they have within their companies, and then seek to improve on the way that they conduct their businesses so that practices in all formats remain sustainable, and focusing on some processes towards what we call net neutrality. And we are finding more and more the bigger customers that are involved in manufacturing, involved in sort of production of oil and gas, taking up this software, which is making them what we will call intelligent organizations. And the idea about sustainability is not just to have some gobbledygook speak about it, but to break that down and to bring it closer to home. And talking about bringing it closer to home, some of our work began in sort of 2008, 2009. When we initially embarked on a program through what we had then called SAP Research in Ghana with the cashew nut and shea butter farmers, and just trying to find processes that we could put in place to enable these women, largely women farmers, to get a better yield, firstly, and more importantly, to get a better price in the marketplace. And that resulted in us eventually developing our SAP Rural Sourcing Management System. And today in Ghana, we're also using that system to assist what you would call in South Africa, and I know we have a global audience today, but in South Africa, people refer to them as the waste pickers. More particularly, they are individual plastic collectors that are out there. And using this rural sourcing management system, what we've been able to do in Ghana, together with the project with the World Economic Forum, was to put in place what we call our SAP Plastics Solution. And essentially, that enables individual plastic collectors to be put onto a system where the amount of plastic that they collect is recorded, the different types of materials outside of plastics that they may be accumulating is recorded. Government is linked up into that, so they have an idea if there are any precious metals that may be also being collected. And then using market analysis to give these individual plastic manufacturers, or plastic collectors, the capacity to be paid fairly. What is the going rate of plastic at that moment in time? And linking them up to buyers who may be more centralized and who are more bona fide, as opposed to some of the cutthroat trading that we've seen happen in some of the streets of South Africa. So I thought I should mention that, and therein lies sort of three things. One is the ability to utilize our primary sort of output, which is our software, to enable the support of what we talk today about, which is the circular economy, ensuring that everything that is produced is included in this sort of cycle of non-waste. More importantly, impacting those that are at the lowest levels of society, being able to give them a fair chance, providing them also with dignity in that process. And then if you extend that further, we know that there are millions of tons of plastics that are produced, and at least 50% of that plastic globally ends up being single-use plastic. So these waste pickers or waste collectors are playing a valuable role in society. And SAP, together with the World Economic Forum, has piloted this in Ghana, and we're seeing the benefits of it. Ultimately reducing the plastics burden in Ghana, but then also assisting government, because government, even in South Africa, has proven to be, so now I won't say they are clueless, maybe the wrong terminology to use, but they haven't come up with any innovative ideas of including these waste pickers into the sort of formal economy, which is so ripe outside the likes of in Johannesburg. You have Pick It Up, in Durban, when you have Durban Solid Waste. So the integration of those individuals into the sort of formal economy hasn't happened to that extent in South Africa. And therein lies a big opportunity. The circular economy, bringing in people who may be outside of it, giving them dignity and ensuring that, they also have the capacity to develop themselves through technology. Now, just taking it one step further, SAP is also part of what we call the Global Plastics Action Partnership. And that is a partnership that has been conglomerated with the World Economic Forum. And the idea is our global CEO went up on the global stage, and within SAP, one of the things as an exemplar is that we don't engage in single plastics use. And this is another area where if you look at corporates and the amount of spending that happens and some of the waste that happens within various corporate, this we believe is a very strong aspect, and it should be like a global standard, not only in corporates, but moving it closer to government, moving it closer to quasi-government organization, social enterprises, and the whole layer. Now, I also want to chat today and highlight a couple of other points. The entire carbon footprinting and the issue of global warming is critical. Even though we are a software company and our emissions are lower than other industries, SAP has taken a very, very direct approach in terms of addressing climate change. And this comes through our deforestation project, which we have. One of them, which we've implemented, is in Madagascar. And the area is called Mararivo, where we found that mangroves were almost totally decimated. We've reforested there. We've built up the economy so that more people could be part of that economy. The local tribes have been utilized to do the reforestation. And in a short space of time, we went from an absolutely barren area to almost 2 million trees that have been planted. But within that context of addressing climate change and forestation, we're also finding that jobs are created. And this is the most difficult thing today. COVID has decimated so many economies. Sustainability within the overarching challenges of what COVID has provided has become more difficult to implement. And I think as we move forward, we'll have to find much more innovative practices, because it's easier to take the less sustainable route than the sustainable one, because there is a cost associated. Now, just talking about the rest of today and where we are going to, I noticed that one of the sponsors is the UN Global Compact. And I smiled when I saw that, because SAP was one of the original signatories to the UN Global Compact so many years ago, almost, I think it's more than a decade ago. I remember that happened in New York. And having these different organizations, the sponsors that are here today, being part of this program, is a further commitment that sustainability is more than just a talk show. The practices that will come out here will determine the future of this country. I'm talking to you using a mobile device today. I would normally be talking to you from a proper, nice, high-speed Wi-Fi internet that I have at home. But the challenges produced by the energy provider, the electrical energy provider, ESCOM, has brought the starkness of sustainable life and what that means. Previously, we would have just put that on the back burner and said, it's just a short time, a short period of time. But increasingly, we're seeing now the energy deficit in the country and the impact that it's had on overall economy in this country. And if we delve down just one step further, I've noted also that there are some parts of the program which talk to a just energy transition. And I know hydrogen would be one of those topics that would come up. But an interesting thing happened recently. The local MD of SAP, she had engaged with one of our biggest customers. And the gentleman is based out of Nigeria. And he said to her, you know what's interesting? This issue of sustainability, let's be clear about it. There's a Western perception of sustainability and an African perception. And there's still a bitterness on the carbon load that has been put into the atmosphere and the planet, and who is actually responsible for that. And there is a larger responsibility on Western industrialized countries to do a lot more. I know there's a fund being made available to support South Africa's transition from coal to other more renewable resources. But we also seen that geopolitical issues such as the Russia-Ukraine war that has happened has changed the way even a mega industrial giant like Germany has begun to engage. Because when Russia cut off the gas supplies, Germany had to look back and see to determine whether they would go back to coal-fired energy sources. So as much as we have good intent, as much as it makes good sense for the planet to be sustainable and sustainable practices to evolve. The geopolitics of our current times and the future will also determine the extent to which we will reduce the overall global warming to less than 1.5 degrees over the next sort of 10 to 15 years. Because ultimately, if you do have these very, very polar sort of thinking around sustainability, around near thinking, which I would say, which is around countries themselves and about space and geography and power, there is that balancing act that needs to take place. And the UN also needs to play a much greater role. It's not good enough just to have 17 SDG goals, but the countries need to be held accountable and responsible for that. Governments need to be held responsible. And how are they going to be held responsible? That framework still has to be determined. Reporting is not enough. We need tangible actions to take place to hold countries. I'm not saying name and shame them, but to hold countries accountable so that when presidents go to the United Nations General Assembly, it's not just about shaking hands and enjoying caviar and sitting in Manhattan and enjoying champagne at the highest levels of those buildings. But it should be more so about what's happening back home to enable the sustainable journey and the sustainable future of these countries and the next generations. Now, I'll leave you with those thoughts for today. And I hope that I have been able to capture your imagination in some way about what we have done as SAP and what we continue to do to support sustainability. But more importantly, how this particular program that has been put together has been well thought out to take into account some of the current challenges, the future challenges, and bringing key stakeholders to the fore. But in your discussions and deliberations, I will also encourage you to be brutally honest, because we are just wasting each other's time if we're going to come here and have pleasantries for the sake of pleasantries. We need to call things out. We need to be able to put actionable programs in place to realize the sustainable future. I thank you and wish you well for the rest of the day.